And we are live! Greetings, salutations, and all that jazz, and welcome to another episode of the World and the Worldbuilding podcast, live. I always say this, but I have a very special guest today. We have the absolutely spectacular human being, Adrian Tchaikovsky, in the house. Adrian, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Oh my goodness, it is an absolute pleasure. So I know Adrian from the UK convention circuit, I guess. We have grumbled at the same coffee machines in the morning, waited in line, wondered when the coffee will come, all of these things. But in fact, Adrian is also a terribly wonderful multiple award-winning, Sunday Times best-selling science fiction and fantasy author, who I will tell you more about in a minute, and also spends an awful lot of time in alien heads, right, Adrian?
Yeah, that does seem to have become my thing as a writer.
And we will talk more about that. That is to say, of course, non-human intelligence, which is our topic for today. So let me introduce Adrian properly before I get ahead of myself. Adrian Tchaikovsky is a British science fiction and fantasy writer known for a wide range of work, including The Children of Time, Final Architecture, Dogs of War, Tyrant Philosophers, and Shadows of the Apt series, as well as standalone books such as Shroud, Alien Clay, Service Model, and many others. Children of Time, which I will be talking about particularly because it is a favorite of mine, and its series has won the Arthur C. Clarke and BFSA awards, and his other works have won the British Fantasy, British Science Fiction, and Sideways awards. You can find all of his work, by the way, guys, at adriantchaikovsky.com, and yes, that is in the chat, so you don't have to figure out how to spell Tchaikovsky. I must say, in a former life, I was a musician. So of all the many words that I struggle to spell, Tchaikovsky is not one of them.
Well, you say that, but this is, of course, not how Tchaikovsky is spelled. For me, my family is Polish, so we have the Polish spelling, which, frankly, nobody in the UK can handle.
Oh my goodness.
And which does not look like it sounds. And so we've kind of cribbed onto the composers just because people are used to it.
It's brand recognition is what it is, Adrian. Sometimes you just got to go with brand recognition. Oh my goodness. Well, we are, of course, talking about non-human intelligence. And as I alluded, Adrian spends an awful lot of time writing in the heads of other creatures, spiders and octopuses, Octopodia, I guess, and hive minds and bioengineered animals and AIs. What is it about non-human intelligence that keeps capturing your imagination as a world builder and a writer?
I mean, I think the simplest answer to that is I was always a weird kid. And when I was growing up, I was far more interested in the aliens and the monsters and the robots and whatever than actually the human characters you were supposed to be identifying with. I had my epiphany moment, honestly, was there's the Roger Corman science fiction show, Battle Beyond the Stars, which I still would kind of die on a hill for. But there's a character in there who's Cayman of the Lambda Zone, who is basically the scary lizard man alien.
Oh, yeah.
And because they're doing the Magnificent Seven in space, he gets to be a hero. And that was just this amazing, yes, you're allowed to have as your heroes these, things that would traditionally be the bad guys or just the background fodder in most science fiction shows. And I've just sort of taken that and run with it. But honestly, I mean, the thing with science fiction and fantasy, whether you're gaming or writing, is you can do things like that. It's the only genre that you can honestly do things like that. So
yeah,
what you?
Yeah, absolutely. Kitoy Boy in the chat says, "Welcome to the Weird Kids Club." That's what we're all in. I would venture to say that most people who are interested in world building, to the extent that they're world anvil users and are really, really excited about world building, yeah, we're all in the Weird Kids Club. We're thrilled to have you with us, Adrian. What is it, beyond obviously sort of the possibility and the excitement of that, are there particular themes that draw you in, you think? Or do you just not like spending time in people's heads, which is also completely reasonable?
I think it's just, I'm always looking for variety when I'm creating. And so, yes, humans, you always tend to need to wedge humans in there somewhere, but it is more interesting to me to be able to work with something completely different, and just to feel I'm kind of exploring a part of the idea space that no one else has particularly gone in before, or at least giving it a new spin.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's really that freshness. It's the new frontier, really, imagination-wise. Wonderful. Now, of course, one of the things that has made your work so successful is the fact that you don't just explore non-human intelligence. You explore it in a way that really feels sort of complete and developed. So the Children of Time, which I have been reading recently, is just such a wonderful example of that. We see this sort of generational exposition of the spider civilization. We see it through the eyes of the spiders. These are not spoilers, but this is a 10-year-old book, my friends. So was that how you approached the world building of your civilization? Did you build it in these sort of generational layers?
Yeah, so Children of Time and most of the other civilizations in that series, because the creatures are based on real world animals that have been sort of uplifted or speed evolved and then developed to culture, you've already got a certain amount handed to you that you can build out from. So you can work with what we know about the current behaviors of these creatures and the sort of the sensory capabilities and the physical capabilities, and then you just kind of work out a ring at a time. Think, well, if they can do that and they get smarter, then they can do that with it, and then they can do that with it, and you build and build, and really everything should hopefully organically create this sort of coherent single whole of the species as they are then encountered by your humans later on.
Yeah. Were there any? So I noticed that you sort of went, as you go through the generations, you tend to hit milestones. Was that sort of how you were thinking as you were world building?
I mean, to a certain extent, that's a narrative thing, and obviously, yes, you could do an everyday story of sort of agricultural spider folk, and nothing really happens for the entire chapter. They just live kind of nice, peaceful lives. But you need to show the moments that things develop. So we get they have a war with the ants, and there is a plague that they have to deal with, and you see how they come to develop their own sort of computational sort of technology. They have one of the fun things, if you're doing this on a science fiction level, sort of more than maybe a fantasy level, is you get to see how they meet recognizable challenges, especially technological challenges, but they can solve them in very different ways. So with the spiders and Children of Time, you have a species that gets from the Stone Age into orbit without ever inventing fire or the wheel, for example, because of their particular capabilities and because of the characteristics of the world they're on. Yeah,
no, that makes a lot of sense. And I love this idea that you start with what you know and then you ripple out. So you mentioned specifically physical morphology, you mentioned the senses. Are there other things that you tend to go for initially when you're considering capabilities and sort of prospective trajectories, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, sensorium is a very big one, because especially if you're writing from the point of view of that creature, giving it a different set of senses to perceive the world is a very good shortcut to making it feel very alien. I think other things to look at are things like life cycle, and because that can give a creature a very, very different set of priorities, and it's worth thinking of the fact that a lot of the things that we assume are baseline as humans are in fact derived from our own life cycle, because there is a particular kind of familial bond that we consider to be, that a large number of people consider to be at the heart of human culture. But that's a human thing. That's certainly a mammal thing. If you were a creature that had 50,000 eggs and then just kind of let them get on with things, you probably wouldn't have that. If you are a creature that is very territorial, so you get a lot of mammals where you have that familial bond, but then you get to a certain age and that is not there anymore, and you can be very adversarial with members of your own kind. So these sort of things, if that species continues to develop and becomes sort of fully sapient as we as humans would recognize it, all of those factors are going to give you a very, very different culture and a very different set of what is important and what these creatures care about, than we would think of as normal for us.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And essentially establishing that sort of core experiential world to start with is something that I thought was so compelling about following the spider people. I should say, by the way, I am a massive arachnophobe, so I did not think I was going to enjoy this book at all. But one of the things that I found was so interesting is that I actually began to really identify with the spider people and their struggles, right? Like I got very much on board with them. And I think it's partly because you did this wonderful work of capturing the voice, which I do have the question for here. Come on, Janet. There we go. The capturing of the voice and the thought patterns in the spider people, in this non-human intelligence that felt both alien and also incredibly relatable. Can you speak a little bit about your process of really sort of developing that voice?
I mean, this is a bit more difficult because I think this is something that there's a lot of kind of subconscious work going into, but really once you've got that far, so you've got your physical creature, you've got its culture, you've got its, all the things that have led to it, that acts as a kind of filter. So that you can then basically add in, okay, well, what are the kind of the recognizable characteristics I want this particular character or this type of creature to have as far as sort of personality goes, and you can give it, I think one of the things I'm doing that I'm giving these spiders characteristics that aren't necessarily traditional fictional spider characteristics, which are mostly extremely negative. So you've got, when you get the Portia character who is sort of seeing the destruction of one of their cities with the rampaging ant hordes, it's a recognizable situation, and the spider is kind of reacting in a way, if that was a fantasy story and you had to kind of like the last sort of warrior guardian kind of trying to face off this absolutely unbeatable enemy as it swarms in, you can see how that would go in a kind of maybe like a David Gemmell style narrative, and then you just put the filter of that spiderness over it, and then hopefully if that works out, you get the best of both worlds, and then you have something that is still alien because of all of those sort of filtering attributes, but at the same time you can empathize with it because you understand what it's trying to do. And I personally do believe that there's a lot more emotional commonality across the animal kingdom than cognitive sciences have been necessarily willing to admit until relatively recently, because recently there was a very strong school of thought, the idea that animals are basically like little robots with no internality, which didn't interest me as a philosophy at all, and is now kind of out of fashion, thankfully. And what that means is we now we can look more openly at things. We now see a far more cognitive complexity, and this is as I've mentioned in other interviews, Children of Time arises out of real research on a real species of spider, which discovered its incredible sort of cognitive sophistication for something that basically doesn't really have a brain.
Yeah, absolutely. How important was the research for you when you were creating these creatures?
Very important, but in two kind of specific ways. I mean, there's the sense that that research is giving you your left wall to build out from. So this is what we know about this creature. Therefore, that's the stuff you can't change. That's the science that you're working with. But also, the more you research, the more you find out, and you find the answers to questions you wouldn't necessarily have known to ask when you're reading around the subject, and then that all goes into the melting pot. There's more things you can use to create that sort of that non-human filter for your characters.
Yeah, absolutely. At what point in the process does this happen for you? So there's the process where you're reading around and you're researching. There is presumably a process where you're refining voice. How does this look as a journey for you as you write? Not just for children, but in general.
The voice tends to come with writing, to be honest. I don't really know voice ahead of time, but I do a lot of world building. I'm a world first sort of author. So yeah, I mean, and I mean, it's worth noting, I'm not saying this is how you do it. This is just how it works for me. Every writer has their own way of going about things. But for me, I need a world that feels real and makes sense. And then because you have a world with all these pieces fitting together, everything you create in that world should then fit with it. And ideally, a lot of things that you might otherwise be independently creating can arise organically from that, so that your characters come from that and your plot can come from that. And certainly the voice comes from that. And that means that ideally the voice sounds right with the creature that is speaking and with the world it is coming from. And all of the interactions between the characters fit because they're all coming out of that sort of gestalt world that you've built.
Sure. Okay, you're preaching to the choir here, because this is I had a wonderful interview with another author. I think actually it was Mer Lafferty, and I thought her mandible was going to fall off when I said I was a world first writer, because this is apparently not such a common thing. But I'm thrilled to hear that you are like me. The world comes first, because yeah, I feel very much the same. So there is the world building, the creation phase. You're a plotter? Do you plot the story and then write?
Mostly, yes. So, and you know, it won't be massively detailed, but I'll generally have like a series of chapters and then sort of beats within the chapter that I'll work to. Recently, with some of my fantasy work, I've been experimenting with just doing the world and then kind of winding up and letting it go. Some of the Tyrant Philosophers series are written like that, and it basically, if you've done the world building well enough, then you are starting off with a set of characters, all of whom have kind of needs and pressures and relationships and trajectories, so that when you sort of drop in to watch them, they will go off and do their thing, and you can follow them around and see all the interactions and go from character to character, and you get this very fun sort of tangled mosaic of different lives as all of your characters are trying to do the things that that you have given them that sort of impetus for.
Chasing their motivations, as it were.
Yeah.
Do you find that is different with human and non-human characters, or is it exactly the same process?
I think that works. However, I suspect for non-human characters, you just need a bit more prep, because one of the things with any part of the writing process is the bits you haven't thought of will get filled in by your sort of defaults.
Yeah.
And what that means is if there are too many bits you haven't thought of, those defaults are going to be the same every time, because it's very much, for example, try and look very carefully at things like the gender balance of my characters in any given book, because the problem is, as a male writer, as a knee jerk, any character you create is more likely to be male, unless you actually think about it. So it is one of the things where you kind of need to put that extra level of thought in, so that the bits you haven't thought of about your non-human species aren't just defaulting to a human standard.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, across all aspects of writing, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
So how does it change in RPGs? Because I happen to know there is a Children of Time RPG coming out. In fact, my moderator is a massive fan, and he has let me know it's launching in 32 days, and we will make sure that the links are in the places. But yeah, how is it different when you're a DM for non-human characters, when you're a player for non-human characters, when improvisation hits the table?
It's tricky. So I mean, I think that a traditional role-playing game doesn't necessarily do non-human characters terribly well. Possibly in the same way that there's certainly kind of a school of science fiction writing that I don't think does non-humans particularly well. And you tend to end up with any given non-human species or alien species or whatever as being what I would call human minus.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like these are the aliens who are very angry, and these are the aliens who are very calm, and these are this fantasy race and well, I guess one of the big things is you tend to end up with them. The range of variation that a given species has is kind of 10% of a human.
Yeah.
And that obviously, I mean, that's a problem because of the way it's, that you're kind of saying, all right, there is a default here and the default is human. Anything else is kind of this little bit of a human. Okay, maybe this thing is stronger, but that's because punching things is kind of all they do. And that kind of thing. And that's the that's a traditional, like your Dungeons and Dragons races tend to follow that, and your Star Trek aliens tend to follow that, and that kind of thing. And obviously, and there's no particular reason for that. The elves, as per Tolkien, there is an astonishing amount of stuff written that Tolkien wrote about but however many types of elves he had and things like that. And obviously, one of the things you get there is they exist in that world for a particular reason. They have a particular relationship with the powers of the world and with the other species, races, whatever, cultures. And that's I mean, I don't think, we can't all do a Tolkien. But I think I guess the problem is with a lot of role-playing game species and races is there's no particular reason for them to be there. They don't have that relationship with other things. They're kind of they're there because you needed another thing that was like a goblin but not a goblin or whatever. I mean, it's the old,
you needed space elves and space orcs, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking of the old Fiend Folio where there was like 8 or 9 extra things that were basically goblins.
Yes.
And didn't have any particular reason not to just be goblins, but I guess they were all from a particular scenario where someone thought, well, I'm going to invent a new type of goblin. If you're creating races and species for your game world, you have an amazing opportunity to work them into. It's not just like those are the guys that live over there and cause people a problem. It's just like, well, why are they not, why are they there and why are humans here? Why are there two different things at all? Why are they not, if you've got a group over there, why are they not just a different human culture if humans are indeed your basis? And there's all sorts of fun you can have answering that kind of question. And in doing so, you're making the world deeper and more immersive, and probably giving yourself a few extra extra scenario ideas while you're at it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like we may have started or dipped a toe into this conversation already. What are some common mistakes people make with alien, that is to say, non-human intelligent species? Now, again, I'm not asking you to be shady. Feel free to name names if you like, but I'm not asking you to name names here. Where do people get things wrong, basically?
I mean, there's definitely the human minus one, and that also tends to go along with basically they're humans, and if you're doing aliens, all right, actually, I will backpedal actually because I'm about to get on a high horse, and before I do that, I will say it very much depends where you are coming from.
Yeah, sure.
If you are doing a Star Wars style space opera thing like that, or something like that, then you don't actually need enormously scientifically verified complex non-human creatures. That's kind of not what that genre is about. And you can have them, but
sure,
that it's not. I don't feel that there is necessarily a sort of a positive pressure to do that.
It's more about space magic and world of weird, right?
Yeah. And similarly, if you're going into this is sort of a Norse myth based thing, then you don't need to have this entire. There's a lot of stuff you can crib from. There are. You need to have an idea of, well, what is the purpose of this particular species in the setting, in the book, in the game, or whatever.
Yeah.
So if you are, however, going into my little corner, if you are doing something that is supposed to be, this is like hard science fiction. It is supposed to be sort of, has some sort of scientific plausibility. Being a humanoid and having eyes and nose and mouth where we have them and that sort of thing, that's a human thing.
Yeah.
Having eyes and nose and mouth, that's kind of a vertebrate thing. Yeah. It's, even on Earth, the majority of creatures are not built like that. Yeah. If you run into aliens, they're not going to be the skinny grey guys with the big heads and so forth, because those are very, very human concepts. It's inherent in the word alien that it is not like us, and there is this sense of our characteristics being so incredibly important to the universe that anything you meet is basically like us with a piece of rubber stuck to its forehead. So that's one. Is if you're doing an alien and you want to do an alien, have how has it evolved? What did it come from? What are the pressures that have led to this thing looking in this particular way, and why would it need to look like us? The other one that you tend to get, and this is an older one now. You don't see it so much in science fiction, but there was a very long time when basically an alien species was an Earth animal on its hind legs. A number of cat aliens, and then you say, well, they're cat aliens, so they have all of these cat-like characteristics. It's just like cats, no less than humans, are a very specific one-off evolution, and there is always I will absolutely confess, there is always a use to saying, yes, it looks a bit like a whatever. It looks a bit like a crab, it looks like a bit like, but having something that is very clearly just a cat or a dog or whatever on its hind legs, so it is also humanoid, wearing clothes, and then it's kind of like a human, but it's got half a dozen sort of cat-related sort of personality tics, is not really very compelling science fiction for me. Yeah, I guess.
No, I get that. I was going to say, with the "it's a human but" problem, I think a massive culprit for that has been, TV. And much as I love Star Trek, to be clear, everybody is related to humans because it's easier to put humans in rubber suits that way.
Well, the thing,
Star Trek, we don't have those limitations when we're writing books.
Yeah. I mean, obviously,
infinite.
With TV, there are budget limitations, especially when you've got aliens as major characters, which, to its credit, is something that Star Trek genuinely went into. But there is, with Star Trek races, it is far more like you're dealing with another culture.
Yeah.
And occasionally occasionally you have, I know that there are various weird things about Vulcans where they can do things that humans can't do and things like that. But it's still, the Vulcans or the Bajorans or the Klingons or whatever, it is very much like this is another human culture that we have a problem with. And obviously, there are things, especially that the original series is doing with like Cold War analogs and things like that, where that is actually deliberately what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Which goes back to your first point of make sure you know why they're there from a narrative perspective, as well as from a world building perspective. So that is aliens and non-human species. I hope I'm not going to set the internet on fire with this one, but what about AI? What do writers get wrong with their assumptions about artificial intelligence, do you think?
Well, apparently that it's in any way intelligent, because that was an assumption. So, I mean, there's a weird one with AI, actually, and this is, I mean, the idea that this thing I've come across quite a lot with people talking about, the robots and AI they're working with, and the idea that it would necessarily have any sense of self-preservation. I mean, there's the classic Skynet thing of, well, yes, Skynet kind of went rogue when they tried to shut it down. But the thing is, okay, but only if you've told Skynet to resist shutting it down. I mean, self-preservation is an evolved trait.
Yeah.
And if you've got a species that is evolving naturally, and therefore, you need offspring to pass on your characteristics to, if one of those characteristics is you don't care if you die, you're probably not going to have offspring, and therefore that is something that evolves, I imagine, rather rapidly. If you just created something out of nothing, it wouldn't necessarily care. I mean, this is what I do with Uncharles in Service Model. Is there are a number of points where Uncharles is going to be destroyed, and he's not particularly bothered. He wants, if he can't actually fulfill the items in his task queue, then it doesn't particularly matter whether he exists or not. And there are a lot of other things like it's. I guess one of the things you tend to get with AI is it is often shown as being essentially kind of superhumanly perceptive in a very broad way. And one of the things that certainly in any kind of machines that we are currently familiar with is that they can be extremely capable, I think, rather than clever in very narrow ways and phenomenally dense in others. So the idea of having, yes, you have you get the Banksian sort of mind, that really is very, very, very advanced, because they're basically kind of demigods at that point. And I will say I absolutely love Banks and the culture and so forth, but really at that point, the minds, they are technically AIs, but they're so far beyond human that you're not really writing about AI in any real sense when you're dealing with that kind of entity. So there are all sorts of fun things you can do with an artificial mind. Because one of the things you get with Avrana Kern in the children books is essentially an uploaded consciousness, and there are moments in the books where she basically doesn't realize that large sections of her memory are gone until she has to try and remember those things, and finds they're not there. So it's like she's got the folders, but the folders are empty. I think that's the other. Much like aliens and fantasy races, you could have a lot of fun with AI by remembering that actually, it doesn't have to be either worse or better than humans. It can be different, which means it can do some things very well and some things very badly. And those aren't contradictions. It's just because it is not us.
Yeah, I think that's very astute. I would also say one of the sort of traditional presentations of AI is that it knows everything. But of course, AI only knows the data that it has access to. There is a huge amount of information that we have as the human species that is not on the internet, for example. So this myth that if AI gets on the internet, it will know everything. It'll know a lot about Reddit, but it won't necessarily know a lot about scholarship, because an awful lot of scholarship is not published on the internet, for example.
Even if it was capable of passing that kind of information in any realistic way, it would know everything 5 different ways, all of which were entirely contradictory. What would you do? Yes. What would you do with suddenly being gifted every single person's opinion on everything, which is basically what the internet is?
Yeah, exactly. Anyone who is academic.
Well, it's just the Alice in Wonderland. Alison and Alice through the Looking Glass line about having to believe so many impossible things before breakfast.
Before breakfast, yeah. I've believed as many as 5 impossible things before breakfast, I think. But yeah, absolutely. And, unless it can wait and pass information, and even if it can, it's going to have to be more advanced than the AI we have now, right?
Yes, which is very plainly not actually able to do that in any realistic way.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about weirdness. How weird can we get? How alien can a mind become before readers stop empathizing with it? What do you think?
I keep trying to push the boundaries, honestly. We've gone from the spiders, which are actually, which are certainly closer to human than some things I went on to write. The octopuses are weirder. You have the sort of the slime mold style creature from Nod, which is very weird indeed. And then we go on to things, games, books like Shroud, which is probably my most alien point of view creature. And the thing, presumably there is a limit. I haven't hit it yet. And one of the things is, I have read books with human characters that I found extremely hard to empathize with. I don't think it's a species thing. I think given that the reader and the writer are both human, presenting an alien thing in a way that people can empathize with it, and frankly, if you can do it with spiders, you can do it with pretty much anything, is entirely doable. You know, you give them, I think one of the key things is you give them challenges that are meaningful to a human. And even if they are very different creatures solving them in very different ways, there is enough commonality. I mean, looking back at the previous topic and thinking of things like the ELISA experiment from back in the, I want to say 70s, I'm not entirely sure. Humans are very good at empathizing with things at the drop of a hat. So I think it's really down to, as long as you are writing it in an engaging way, it will be, or will have at least the potential of being capable of being empathized with.
I think that is really insightful. I especially love the idea of, presenting conflict that has resonance to us and watching them overcome it is such a clever way of, putting a character in action, giving the audience emotions, even if the character themselves are having slightly different ones or they're presenting in a different way. I think that's genius. No notes. So, are humans as intelligent as we think we are? Or are we just writing the tests and then filling them in ourselves?
I mean, I suspect humans are both more and less intelligent than we think they are, because one of the things we've never really been able to do is measure intelligence. IQ tests don't particularly do that. The history of psychology is full of ways that we have attempted to simplify the human mind enough to measure it, at which point you're not really measuring the human mind. There are lots of ways of being intelligent that don't sort of show up on the rather sort of academically minded tests. At the same time, there's an awful lot that is going on with in the human mind that is prompted by both the subconscious mind and honestly the hormonal system of the body, the gut macrobiome is microbiome.
I hope it's not a macrobiome.
Yeah. The gut microbiome as an influence on basically how we act and who we are is a burgeoning area of research. There's certainly some research to suggest that a lot of things we do, we justify post facto as to why we did them. And in fact, the impetus came earlier and from a subconscious source. There is some very fascinating stuff that suggests that the way that our brain cells get together to make decisions is very similar to the way that ants' nests work, for example. Just nodding my own sort of area of interest. But I think the answer to the question is humans are intelligent differently to the way we think we are. In ways that we are still sort of rather painstakingly discovering, because partly because it's just a very difficult thing to study. But also because it's not something we necessarily want to be true. We want to think that we have a self and that self is a real thing, and that when we make a decision, we are making it for the rational reasons, and that is very often not true. And honestly, even with the self, you're a different person from moment to moment. You kind of occupy a point at any given time within this big cloud of possibilities that sort of encompass the sort of person you are, and that cloud can shift over time, obviously, as things happen to you. But when I am, for example, hungry, I am a far less pleasant person than when I am not.
The minute you said we are different people from point to point, I was like, yes, I too suffer from the hangries. Um,
Well, it's a real thing, and the thing is, when you're hungry, that's activating parts of your brain which are, I suspect, have existed unchanged for a very long period of time evolutionarily, and I basically tell, oh, you've got to eat. This is bad thing that's happening. You're not happy. You're uncomfortable. If anyone is trying to stop you eating, then they're an enemy or whatever. But that is, and that is a part of you that lives inside you and just wakes up at the relevant stimulus. And there are all sorts of ways that works.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really interesting. Do you think that?
And and to bounce back to other previous topics, of course. Yeah. Well, then what if you have a species where that's not the case? Yeah. What if you have a species where they have far more conscious control or far less conscious control?
Yeah. Or they have, different levers that provoke different kinds of responses. Narcoleptic goats come to mind.
I saw those in Bradford at the Corn Exchange.
Yeah, exactly. But if you have a species where instead of getting hangry, you just fall over unconscious suddenly, it's a very different kind of culture,
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not entirely sure evolutionarily how that works, but
more research is required. Are there any surprising lessons that you've learned from inhabiting non-human minds for long periods of time?
I mean, I don't think surprising, because essentially surprising is what you are expecting, if that makes any sense. The reason you're going there is to be shown something new, and to let your kind of your initial setup, your world building, your kind of creature design to take you somewhere really interesting, because you're giving it those sort of initial conditions, but you don't necessarily know where those dominoes are going to end up when you flick them over.
Sure. Do you feel like it's giving you more insight into writing human characters, or it hasn't really affected that?
I mean, I suspect it probably has, but also it's one of those. Hopefully my ability to write human characters is developing in step, so it's kind of hard to know what has come from where.
Oh, of course, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So you've spoken a lot about the fact that you're a world building first writer, and you are, of course, I don't want to say terrifyingly prolific, but very prolific. Several books per year have come out at various points. Do you feel like the world building is something that's helped you write faster?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly one of the factors, I think, and the reason for this is almost entirely because once you've got that coherent world, everything that goes into it is coming from that same point, which means that it all fits together. Yeah. So where I am honestly making up time is not that I'm writing faster, it's that I'm writing a draft that is going to be very similar to what I eventually submit, because I don't need to go back and retcon a load of stuff, because it's all already meshing and sort of Legoing nicely together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you find that writing books in worlds that you've already created has the same effect? Is that even faster, maybe?
I mean, honestly, usually, because these days my memory is not what it was. It means I have to go back and reread my older book, which actually adds a whole step to the process.
Yeah, fair. What are the things that you prioritize when you're building a world?
It really depends where I am on the sort of the genre map. So I know if I'm doing something that is hard science fiction, I need to work out what the science is that the story demand, and that will frequently involve sort of be a prerequisite to certain parts of the world building process.
Yeah.
When I'm working with a fantasy world, I tend to be more interested in cultures, societies, beliefs, that kind of thing. I mean, in general, I'm usually trying to give a sense of the world, a world that can be genuinely lived in. And there's a certain, again, I'm going back a bit with this sort of comment, but there's a certain type of, let's say, a fantasy city. in a book or a game. And in this fantasy, this is the palace of the Duke, and this is the wizard's tower, and here is the big temple, and here is the thieves' district. And at no point is there anywhere that anyone actually can live.
Sure.
And there's no legitimate commerce. It's like music in Star Wars. It only belongs to criminals.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid. And in the same way as, oh yes, well, if there is a myth, then the myth is vitally important to whatever the story is about, or whatever the campaign is about. And the myth can be taken absolutely literally. And there's no idea that people just tell stories, and the stories change in the telling. And while that whether or not there is a germ of truth in there, it doesn't mean you can literally just note it all down and then use that as the solution for dealing with the big bad at the end of the campaign or whatever. So you have traditions, and you have festivals, and you have multicultural societies, because that's also been a historical thing since forever. And the monoculture that some both books and games tend to produce. So yes, in this country everyone does this, and in the next country apparently they're completely different, despite the fact that presumably people have been crossing that border for hundreds of years and intermarrying and all that sort of thing. And and also all of the people here, there are no minorities, there are no different beliefs, everyone has this religion, and that it's getting out of that kind of thing and just giving this complex real feeling world is generally, because I need to feel immersed in a setting if I'm going to be writing in it, and I want to make readers feel immersed in that as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, to your point from earlier, you don't want to be writing your own default, and you also don't want to be writing a world default. You want a spectrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have mentioned that you really enjoy writing non-human characters, and the weirder the better. What is next for you in the scope of non-human intelligence?
Well, that's a good question. Let me think. I've got my I've got my raccoon book coming up. So this is Green City Awards is actually out at the end of this month. So it's not next to me to write, but it's certainly next to be put in print. So it's a cyberpunk noir detective story starring a raccoon.
That's glorious. Absolutely glorious. Is that more mammalian than most of your non-human intelligence?
I've done mammals. I've done dogs and dogs of war and things like that. So it's they're also it's mostly mammals and some birds and some amphibians in that one.
Interesting. Okay. Macrobiome novel when?
I haven't. I mean, yes, you do start to wonder what you could do with that as a concept, don't you?
This is the problem with being a world builder: is you say something, there's a slip of the tongue, something comes out you didn't mean to. 5 minutes later, you're like, actually, I could. It's dreadful. So raccoons is what I'm hearing, and what's coming next after that? Can I ask what you're working on right now? Is it Secret Squirrel?
I can't particularly go into details. I've just delivered a book which has a very weird set of non-human characters, but they're kind of human derived, so they're in that sort of halfway space. After that, the next big sci-fi project, which I'm still kind of trying to get to grips with mentally, is going to be very weird and philosophical, but I'm also going to have some very fun aliens in it. And one of the things the book is going to be about is mortality, and one of the alien species will have no kind of lifespan. They will just last. And the idea of, well, what does that do as a culture if you have absolute, if literally there is no reason why you have to die.
Right, you are just the immortal jellyfish. You just hang out forever. Yeah. That's so interesting. Well, I can't wait. I'm very excited. We do have a very fine audience question, which I would like to share, from Streven Ryder over on YouTube, who asks, how do you go about having non-human intelligences that have other senses of perception, such as magnetic fields? So I think the question is, how do we portray and share things that humans have no reference point for?
It was, I mean, the one I did this for most was Shroud, where in fact, the entire biosphere, basically, the main sense is essentially kind of radar. It's electromagnetic pulse and bounce. And it took me a long while to kind of think through what that might be like in a way that I could describe in human language.
Yeah.
And you have a sense, I think what you can do as a shortcut is you can co-opt the language of other senses and apply it in a weird and inappropriate way. So you can talk, if you are touching, you are getting a sort of a tactile sense at a distance and things like that. And so sometimes the best way of going about that sort of thing is really just to find a set of language that wouldn't normally be applied in that way, and borrow the markers of that, which will simultaneously give you something which is comprehensible to the reader, whilst at the same time being very obviously weird.
Yeah, really good point. It reminds me of the descriptions of Sergeant Angua in Terry Pratchett, and how she smells in color, essentially, because it was such a good way to create a language around that and give a sense that people would understand as a sort of audience surrogate sense, as it were. Very, very interesting. Well, thank you, Stephen Ryder, for the question. That was fantastic. Of course, I must ask this question. Where should people start with your work? As I mentioned, you are quite prolific. There are many options, but especially if people are interested in non-human intelligence, what's a good jumping in point, do you think, for your own work?
Okay, I mean, you could do a lot worse than go for Children of Time. I also tend to point people at Dogs of War, which is where the main character is the first person narrative from the point of view of a kind of a cybernetically uplifted dog. If you want something genuinely alien, then, like I say, Shroud from last year is fairly solid for that. And again, it's a standalone, so it's a good jumping in point.
Fantastic. So Shroud and I'm so
Dogs
sorry,
of War.
Dogs of War. Thank you.
Dogs
so
of War and Children of Time.
Fantastic. Guys, you can find all of that over at adriantchaikovsky.com. I did have one other question come in, which is, what do people get wrong about spiders?
That they're in any way dangerous. I mean, Australians accepted, obviously, although fascinatingly, Australians tend to be very chill about spiders, despite the fact that they genuinely have some dangerous ones. And in this country, we're weirdly hysterical about them, despite the fact that there are no really harmful species in the country. I think a lot of the time is actually, here is the thing. This is a game thing. Is that spiders are a hive intelligence type thing, because the number of settings where you run, yes, this is the mother spider and the enormous brood of other spiders, and that's not a spider thing. You don't get like an ant equivalent. You do get communal spiders. They just don't work particularly like that. There are social spiders. They've evolved multiple times, which is itself quite fascinating. But you don't get like the one huge queen spider and then all the little worker spiders and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like it's taken from waves of mook culture in RPGs. Spiders, not mooks. Only main characters. This is what we're hearing here. Well, Adrian, I must thank you so very much for joining us today. Are there any final words you'd like to leave to my world builders, my writers, my RPG players about non-human intelligence?
I mean, really, just when you decide you want to have a crack at it, don't think of it as like a hill to get over. Think of it as an opportunity. It's for my money, it's the most interesting part of the creative process.
I love it. Well, I cannot thank you enough for joining us. And folks, I cannot recommend Adrian's work enough. It is an absolute delight. And I, who am horrified by bugs and spiders and things that crawl, I can't help it. It's something deep within my psyche, as we were talking about before. But even I have loved these books, and they are simply wonderful. So please, I do recommend them. And of course, the RPG is coming out 32 days, right? How much participation have you had in that project?
I've done some playtesting of the sort of human ArcShip parts of it. I know there is like a beta test version that's very recently been made available.
Very exciting. So folks, if you are curious about this world, you can go and play in it. The links have been shared, and of course they will also be in the podcast in the description, so you will be able to find all of that there. Folks, just a reminder that it is summer camp prep time. We are getting ready for our marathon world building challenge in July, 32 prompts in about 32 days. So it is time to get your world ready. And tomorrow, the fantastic Secondhand Samurai is going to be going live, sharing the next theme. So everything to play for, make sure you turn up for that. And I wish you all the best of luck, all the joy, and basically grab your hammer and go world build. Bye, guys.